Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take those sources you're curious about and really pull out the key insights.
Exactly. You want the knowledge without, feeling totally overwhelmed. That's what we do.
Today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating, excerpts from the memoir Uptown Girl.
Yeah, our listeners sent these over. They're these incredibly vivid early childhood memories. We're going to explore perception, memory, formative experiences.
Right. But that's not just like the usual kid stuff, riding bikes, playing games, although that's definitely in there.
Oh, yeah.
But there's also this, well, almost unbelievable story involving some major Hollywood names from back in the day.
It really makes you think about memory, imagination, the whole thing.
It does. So, yeah, get ready for a real exploration of childhood and how it shapes us. Okay, where do we start?
Well, the memoir kicks off with this image. Her early memories are like a black and white film, she says. Kind of disjointed.
Fragmented.
Right.
That suggests right away it's not this smooth, linear story she's recalling. More like snapshots.
Exactly. Snapshots, maybe colored by later events, or just how a kid's brain stores things differently.
And she identifies strongly as a California girl, right? Even
Yeah.
though she wasn't actually born there.
Yeah, born in Michigan, Groundhog Day apparently, February 2nd, 1954. But they moved to Canoga Park, L.A. when she was only 6 months old.
So California is basically all she knew from the start. Makes sense.
Totally. And we get the initial family setup. Biological dad, Herb Hudson, her mom, and her brother, Greg, about 18 months older. Looked alike, apparently.
Okay. But things change. There's a divorce.
Right when she was 8. And her mother remarries Don Brinkley, who she then calls father. That's a big shift in a young life.
And the memoir mentions her mother trying to, erase the time with Herb?
Yeah, it's quite striking. Physically altering photos, cutting Herb out. It's like trying to literally rewrite history.
Wow. That must have impacted how the author remembered things, or even what she remembered.
You'd have to think so. It adds to that fragmented feeling, perhaps. Makes you wonder how family stories shape our own personal memories.
Definitely. But some memories do come through very clearly from that time with Herb.
Or absolutely specific little moments, like riding bikes with Greg to the freeway overpass.
Trying to get truckers to honk. I think lots of kids did that.
Totally relatable. And then there's the story about the microphone ashtray that was also a lighter.
Ouch. Burned lips. Yeah, that sounds like something you wouldn't forget easily.
No kidding. These little anecdotes, they seem simple, but they show you that childhood curiosity, exploring, sometimes getting slightly singed.
And then there were alligator.
Pet alligators.
Yeah.
Sent from Florida by Herb's parents. Yeah, that's not your average childhood pet. Really paints a picture of a somewhat unusual background.
No kidding. And she mentions a friend biting her arm hard enough to leave a scar. Deb.
Yeah, another one of those sharp, maybe slightly unsettling specific memories that stand out.
But then the tone shifts, doesn't it? When she talks more directly about her.
It does. It gets darker. She's quite blunt about not liking him, about the emotional scars.
And the physical punishment. Being whipped with a belt, mouth washed out with soap.
Yes. It paints a picture of childhood really marked by fear, by a feeling of powerlessness.
What stands out is that she says it felt arbitrary, like being good didn't mean you were safe.
Exactly. That unpredictability. The constant anxiety, waiting for it, that must have been incredibly stressful.
And her mom was scared too, trying to protect them.
It seems so. Which just adds another layer to the tension in the house. You feel the fear all around.
That detail about hiding magazines in her pajamas.
Yeah, such a specific, poignant image, isn't it? A child trying to find some comfort, some kind of shield.
And the fear of being sent to an orphanage, made worse by Shirley Temple movies.
Right. It shows how vulnerable kids are and how stories, even movies, can tap into and magnify those deep-seated fears.
It really makes you think about how those kinds of early experiences, that fear and instability, can really shape your sense of self, your sense of safety.
Absolutely. Those negative memories, they probably contribute a lot to why that period feels so charged, maybe even jumbled in her recollection.
But it wasn't all bleak. You mentioned escapes.
Right. There were bright spots. Watching Westerns on TV was a big one. John Wayne, Roy Rogers, Dale Evans.
Sky King, too, she mentions. Classic escapism.
Totally. And the horses were key. She loved Black Beauty, National Velvet. Horses in those shows felt almost mythical, she says.
A big contrast to Canoga Park, I imagine.
Definitely. That romanticized Wild West idea, freedom, adventure. Maybe it offered something missing in her day-to-day life. Shows how important imagination can be for kids, especially when things are tough.
Which sort of leads us perfectly into this really central, almost surreal memory involving the cornfield.
Ah, yes, the cornfield. It was across the street, forbidden territory, and the setting for something extraordinary.
The context is grim, though, right? She's being sent to the den, this sullen and gray place to be whipped again.
Yes, this place associated with fear and punishment.
Hmm.
And in that moment, facing that dread,
Mm.
something happens.
She feels like she's floating upwards while holding onto a doorknob.
Yeah, floating up,
Yeah.
hands still clutching the closet doorknob.
Yeah.
It's, well, psychologists might talk about dissociation, maybe. A way the mind protects itself from trauma.
Could be, but then it gets even stranger. She floats over the cornfield.
Over the cornfield, which she describes as glimmering like gold. Really vivid sensory details.
And sees a ranch house with a white fence.
And then, trigger, Roy Rogers' famous horse,
Yeah.
and a woman who looked just like Dale Evans.
Wow, okay. So in this moment of extreme stress, she has this incredibly detailed, almost magical vision.
It's a puzzle, isn't it? Was it an incredibly vivid daydream? A coping mechanism pushed to an extreme? Or something else? It really blurs the lines of perception and reality, especially for a child under duress.
And then, just like that, she's back.
Snap. Back in the den, feet on the floor, and the whipping happens.
Yeah.
That contrasts the golden vision, then the harsh reality is incredibly powerful.
But what happens next is amazing. She doesn't doubt it.
Not at all. She's completely convinced, so much so that she rounds up the neighborhood kids.
To take them to see Roy Rogers and Dale Evans across the forbidden cornfield.
Yep. Leads them right through it, singing happy trails, apparently. It's this act of pure childhood conviction. Maybe trying to prove it to herself, too.
And they get there, and what happens?
They get to the house,
Yeah.
and she says Trigger is there. The kids are thrilled, obviously.
Seriously, trigger.
That's the story. And then Dale Evans comes out
Dale Evans.
and invites them in.
For cookies. Can you imagine a bunch of kids just wander onto Roy Rogers and Dale Evans' property, and Dale Evans invites them in for cookies?
That's unbelievable.
The memory is so specific, smelling the cookies baking, seeing the memorabilia inside the house, that would sear itself into a kid's brain.
But then it takes a turn.
Yeah, reality intrudes. Dale mentions hearing a news report about missing kids and says she's called the police.
Oh boy. So the adventure turns into a rescue mission.
Pretty much. They get taken home in police cars, sirens, lights, the whole deal. What a story to tell. Was she punished?
She wasn't sure if she'd be punished back home, but she felt like the whole expedition was, a success. She'd proven her point, in a way.
And she still believes it was real.
That's the key part. For her, that encounter happened. It speaks volumes about memory, belief, and how powerful certain childhood experiences can be.
And later in life, there are these connections that seem to ground the story a bit.
Right. Years later, she becomes friends with Steve Cohen, Billy Joel's creative director. Turns out he also grew up in Canoga Park, near Roy and Dale.
Huh. Small world.
And she mentioned seeing a New York Times article about a tragic bus crash involving Roy and Dale's church group, also from Canoga Park.
So these little details sort of tether this fantastical memory to a real place and time, making it feel less purely imaginary.
Exactly. They act like little anchors in reality. That doesn't fully explain the floating or the vision, but it connects the people and the place in a concrete way.
Interesting. So how does she ultimately frame this whole thing?
Well, she reflects on how life can just be inexplicable sometimes. And she makes a choice, essentially, to embrace the magic, the possibility, rather than just focusing on the hardship or trying to debunk it all.
So the meaning it holds for her is more important than whether it was objectively real in every detail.
Precisely. It highlights how subjective memory is and the meaning we find in our own stories.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've really journeyed through the complexities of childhood memory.
Yeah, the fragmentation, the mix of mundane and utterly strange, the way imagination and reality can seem to blur.
And the lasting impact of both the difficult times and these moments that feel almost magical, like the pet alligators or, meeting Roy Rogers and Dale Evans after floating over a cornfield.
It's quite a narrative. That cornfield story, especially, leaves you pondering the power of memory and how we interpret these really intense experiences.
Definitely gives you a lot to chew on from these Uptown Girl excerpts. So maybe a final thought for you listening. How do your own early memories shape how you see reality now?
Are there moments from your childhood that still feel, well, a bit mysterious or magical when you look back?
It's worth thinking about those personal stories, isn't it? And the power they still hold for you. Ever have one of those moments that feels Well, almost like flipping a switch, like going from an old black and white film right into, boom, bright Technicolor.
Oh, that metaphor.
Yeah, that's exactly the image used in the memoir excerpts a listener sent in Uptown Girl, a memoir, chapter 2 specifically. It describes this really pivotal childhood time.
Mhm.
So today, we're going to explore that shift. It all kicks off around her parents' separation. This is the early 1960s, and someone new entering the picture who really changes things for her.
It's fascinating how the author sets that up right away, that contrast, because it is a time of huge upheaval. The family's breaking apart, they move, her mother starts a new job.
Right, as a switchboard operator.
Exactly. And even that detail about her mother's voice, how callers liked it, it sort of hints at this underlying resilience, doesn't it? Maybe a sign of the positive things to come, even in tough times.
Yeah, I think so. And smack bang in the middle of all this change arrives Dawn Brinkley. And the author actually has this funny story about how she sort of feels she engineered their meeting.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, it started super simply. She was helping her mom deliver an envelope, just a little task.
Okay.
But she remembers feeling like an important assistant. You know how kids get that feeling of responsibility?
Oh, absolutely. Very significant.
And she even recalls the office building, describes it as looking like a 1960s motel. Very specific detail.
That detail really does ground it, puts you right there in that time and place. And it's in this pretty ordinary setting, this motel-like office, that this really important connection begins, almost accidentally.
Right. She ends up in the wrong office.
Yeah, and Don Brinkley's reaction is, well, it's quite revealing, isn't it? He could have just brushed her off.
Totally.
But instead, he's described as being warm. He helps her out, makes sure she finds the right office, and even tells her mother later how polite she was. Little things.
But they add up, don't they? Those small kindnesses.
They really do, especially then. And apparently it's because of that positive first impression.
He calls her mom for a date.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The interaction stuck with him.
And then this leads to what sounds like a really core memory for their author. Don shows up for the date, but he brings a gift specifically for her.
Yes, the pink purse.
The pink plastic purse, filled with, all the classic little girl stuff, tiny plastic heels, play lipstick, a little mirror.
Oh, fantastic.
She says she felt like she was in heaven, just pure joy.
That pink purse becomes such a potent symbol, doesn't it? It's not just a toy. It's like a tangible piece of kindness of someone paying specific positive attention to her.
Which maybe she wasn't getting elsewhere.
Perhaps, or at least not in that focused way. It's amazing how a relatively small gesture like that can cement itself as such a powerful positive memory, especially when a child's world is kind of unsteady.
Yeah.
It immediately sets Dawn up as this really caring figure.
Absolutely. And the memoir, it really draws a stark contrast between Dawn's presence and her relationship with her biological father, Herb Hudson.
Right.
The author mentions her mother and Dawn's relationship developed quickly but respectfully, especially considering, the times, 1960s views on divorce and all that.
Context is important there.
But Dawn's way with her and her brother was just completely different from Herb's infrequent and often quite negative interaction.
How so? What kind of differences?
Well, we hear about Dawn helping enthusiastically with homework, for instance, and getting down on the floor to join in her games, like building these mini-moated villages she loved making.
Ah, imaginative play. That's lovely.
Stuff Herb apparently never did. And she even remembers the sound of Dawn's typewriter late at night after he'd helped them, catching up on his own writing work. She found it comforting.
That comparison really highlights Dawn's impact. It's active involvement versus, well, disinterest, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That specific detail about Herb toweling them off roughly at the beach, making them uncomfortable, it just paints a picture of someone not really tuned into them,
Right. Not considerate.
Whereas Don, not only playing but then making up his own work time, that shows a real depth of care, I think.
Definitely. So the story then moves to this new house on Old Malibu Road. The author remembers it really fondly, this weird ice plant in the yard, being right near the beach, exploring tide pools.
Sounds idyllic almost, a sanctuary.
It does. But this positive new chapter gets shattered by this really violent encounter with Herb back at the old house.
Oh, what happened?
It's shocking, actually. She recounts Herb punching Dawn and then even stabbing him with a coat hanger.
Good heavens, a coat hanger. That's brutal.
Yeah. Truly disturbing, and her reaction is immediate shock, fear, and just this instant, intense negativity toward her.
Understandably. And Don's reaction to that.
That's the thing, it's juxtaposed so clearly. Even though Don was the one attacked, his main concern seemed to be her, the author. He apparently apologized to her, saying something like, "You shouldn't have seen that. That kind of violence is never okay."
Wow. Even in that moment, his focus is protective. That speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah,
About his character and the role he was stepping into.
it really does. Which then leads us to this courtroom scene. This is after her mother and Don have gotten married.
Okay.
She's only 8, so she doesn't grasp all the legal stuff, obviously, but she definitely feels the emotional weight of it all.
Sure. Kids pick up on that atmosphere.
The judge asks Herb these direct questions about, giving up his parental rights, and his answers are just described as cold, emotionless.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I understand.
Oh, that must have been incredibly hard to witness, even if she didn't fully hit the legalese.
Exactly. And her internal thoughts are just heartbreaking. Why didn't Herb Hudson want me anymore? Why didn't he love me? Had I done something wrong? Just devastating self-blame.
Oof. Yeah, that really hits home. The impact of that kind of rejection, especially delivered so coldly on a child's sense of self, it's profound. His flat affect probably just amplified those feelings of being unwanted.
Yeah.
That description of her feeling lifeless and numb really captures the trauma of it.
And then, again, the contrast. When the judge asks Don if he will accept full parental responsibilities,
Let me guess.
his response is this immediate, enthusiastic, yes, absolutely.
Ah, wonderful.
You can just imagine the relief for her. She describes feeling this huge sense of relief, this hope that maybe the bad stuff, the rejection, was finally over. Acceptance directly countering rejection in that stark courtroom setting.
It's such a powerful turning point. Acceptance versus abandonment, right there.
It is. And the memoir connects this moment quite painfully to something that happens much later in her adult life.
Oh.
Yeah, when her third husband relinquishes parental rights to their infant son, she describes that same lifeless and numb feeling washing over her again.
Wow. So those early experiences, they echo, they leave a deep imprint that can get reactivated later, even in different circumstances.
Yeah.
That link is really telling.
It really is. And interestingly, she also mentions seeing a psychiatrist just once during her divorce from her fourth husband. And the psychiatrist, hearing her history, basically said he couldn't see how she could possibly trust a man ever again.
A fairly bleak assessment,
What?
given the history.
Right. But her response is so striking. She tells him essentially, "But I believe in love. And I believe that if it's the right person, if it's real love, it can overcome all the pain and betrayal."
So despite everything, that fundamental hope remains.
Exactly. It persists.
That really highlights, the resilience people can have, that core belief system. Even after significant trauma and potential reasons not to trust, she holds on to the possibility, the power of love. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how much those early wounds dictate things versus how much positive experiences can genuinely reshape our outlook.
So thinking back over this whole chapter, this deep dive, what are the big takeaways for you?
Well, first off, the sheer impact of focused kindness and positive attention on a child during a really vulnerable time, it's undeniable here.
Yeah, Dawn's engagement versus Herb's detachment.
Exactly. That stark contrast between rejection and acceptance and how deeply that must have shaped her developing sense of self-worth, her ideas about relationships. And then, despite all the pain points, this enduring belief in love she carries, that's pretty powerful too.
Isn't that pink purse?
Oh.
It keeps coming back to me. Such a small thing, but it really does feel like the symbol of that turn, doesn't it? The arrival of care, of being seen.
It absolutely does. It's the perfect little object to encapsulate that big shift from the black and white to the Technicolor, going back to that initial image.
It really makes you think about your own life, the people or moments that brought that color in, maybe through gestures that seemed minor at the time, but just stuck.
The lasting power of small kindnesses.
Yeah. Which brings us, I guess, to a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on.
How much do those earliest experiences, the really formative ones, shape our capacity for trust later on, our core beliefs about love and connection?
Right. Can those early, maybe difficult black and white experiences ever be fully painted over by later Technicolor moments? Or do they always leave some kind of subtle underlying trace on the canvas? Something to think about.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you give us. Today, it's excerpts from a memoir, and really pull out the key insights for you, nice and clear. You, our learner, want that knowledge quickly without getting bogged down. And that's our mission, exploring this author's formative years, Her childhood, her adolescence.
Yeah, looking at what shaped her early life based purely on what she remembers and shares in these writings.
Exactly. We'll go chronologically, starting with childhood, moving through the teens. So let's just jump right in.
Okay. Well, what immediately strikes you, I think, in these early chapters is the author's description of life shifting pretty dramatically after her parents married.
That move she describes.
Yes, exactly. From, well, she puts it as black and white to Technicolor.
That's such a vivid image, like flipping a switch.
It really is. And it wasn't just, a feeling. She links it very strongly to her father's influence, creating this sense of a much more vibrant life.
And that vibrancy wasn't just internal, right? It showed up in, well, these amazing spontaneous trips.
Absolutely. Starting with that weekend trip to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Wow. Just like that. As a kid.
Yeah, imagine. Suddenly you're on a plane heading south. Think about the impact of being dropped into a totally different culture like that.
Huge, I'd imagine. What does she remember specifically?
Oh, lots of sensory stuff. Life spilling out onto the streets, artisans making things, animals wandering around. Just a world away from her normal life.
That kind of early exposure must build something in you, right? Like a comfort with the unfamiliar.
I think so. Curiosity, definitely. Maybe that willingness later on to, move to Paris comes partly from this foundation. And these weren't just quick tourist hops either.
Oh.
They went to Yalapa, more rustic. You had to get there by boat.
Right, I remember reading that.
And they even hiked to a waterfall, so a bit deeper than just the surface level.
Yeah, getting a real glimpse. And the Mexico trips kept happening.
Uh-huh. Later on, easier trips to Tijuana, too.
Yeah.
Drawn by the beach, the handmade trinkets.
You can sort of see the seeds being planted there, can't you? For her connection later with Mexican food, art, that whole culture.
Definitely. These repeated positive experiences with another culture. It's more than just interest. It's probably fostering a kind of global awareness early on. Valuing new experiences becomes a pattern.
Absolutely. And this spontaneity, it wasn't just Mexico. There was that other weekend.
Oh, the San Francisco trip.
Yeah. We're going to San Francisco for brunch. Just like that.
It's that impulsiveness again, isn't it? Embracing the unexpected, and those little details stick: the trolley cars, seeing sea otters.
Simple things, but they become core memories.
Totally. But maybe the biggest thing from those San Francisco trips, seeing Funny Girl.
Ah, Barbra Streisand. That was huge for her.
Ignited a lifelong passion for musicals, apparently, just from that one experience.
Amazing. And San Francisco became a regular thing.
Yeah, a tradition. Staying at the Sir Francis Drake, the cheese blintzes, even Ramos gin fizzes. It paints this picture, doesn't it? A childhood with these delightful, almost kind of magical punctuation marks.
Yeah. It feels like the parents were consciously creating this fun, maybe slightly sophisticated atmosphere. Not necessarily through lots of money, but through these memorable moments.
Exactly. Creating positive associations, a sense of security alongside the fun.
And their home sounds pretty unique, too. That Malibu apartment.
Right, on pilings, literally over the ocean.
Imagine waking up to that every day.
Must have been incredible. And she mentions, it wasn't a mansion, but it felt fancy to her. That connection to the ocean, the sound, the view.
Very formative, I bet.
Yeah.
And didn't she live next door to someone famous? Or infamous?
Yeah, the actor who played the creature from the Black Lagoon.
No way.
Yeah. It just adds this layer of, Hollywood surrealness to her everyday life. Blurs the lines a bit.
Definitely. But beyond the places and events, her father's philosophy seems key.
Oh, absolutely. That line he gave her. Christie, baby, you write your own script.
That's powerful. What does that really instill in a kid?
Well, it's huge, isn't it? Agency. Personal responsibility. The idea that life isn't just something that happens to you.
Right. You're the one in charge, making the choices.
Exactly. You're the active creator. And he reinforced it later when talking about tough times, didn't he? Something like,
you just got to figure out how to write yourself out of that corner, honey.
That's it. Such a proactive, problem-solving way to look at challenges. Don't get stuck. Figure out the next scene, basically.
And you see her putting that into practice, like with wanting horses.
Yeah. She wanted them, so, okay, figure it out. Get a job. Her dad helps. She takes lessons.
At that dude ranch near Palm Springs. White sun.
Riding out in the desert. It shows her taking initiative and her dad supporting that effort, not just handing it to her. Learning the value of working for something you want.
Seems like there was a nice community feel, too, in their building in Malibu.
Yeah, she mentions that annual driftwood boat contest.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
How important is that kind of local community feel when you're growing up?
Oh, it can be really grounding. That sense of belonging, shared local traditions. It provides stability, you know,
Right.
especially if there were any other dynamics shifting within the family. It's a nice anchor.
Speaking of family dynamics, she notes her mother changed quite a bit, became more loving after someone named Herb Hudson left.
Right. That detail really highlights how much the parent's own well-being and relationship affects the child's world.
That makes sense.
And she gives that specific example of her mom being really friendly and chatty at the local gas station, showing that shift in personality suggests a happier, more stable emotional climate for the author.
Okay. And music was clearly a big deal in the house.
Huge, especially with her father, listening to albums together, sharing discoveries.
It was a real mix, too, wasn't it? She'd bring Joni Mitchell or Bob Dylan.
And he'd introduce her to Stan Getz, Joan Gilberto, Astrud Gilberto, Ray Charles, Diana Washington, Ella, Billie Holiday.
Wow, what an education.
Seriously. And, significantly, Edith Piaf.
Ah, the French connection again.
Exactly. It's like these early sounds were already pointing towards France, planting those seeds for what became a huge passion later on. It wasn't just listening, it was building connections, opening worlds.
Which, yeah, leads us perfectly into how her other interests started showing up. Art, language.
Right. And that first real encounter with French came from a movie.
Les Parapluies de Cherbourg.
Mm-hmm.
The Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
What was it about that film that grabbed her so much?
Apparently, just everything. The music, obviously, but also just the sound of the French language, the story, the whole package just clicked.
Like an epiphany moment?
Seems like it. And her dad, again, supportive, he bought the soundtrack.
Which she then used to start learning French.
Yeah, like her own little language lab.
Yeah.
And she mentions feeling this intuitive connection to it, even in some improv class later.
Interesting. That hints at maybe a natural affinity, doesn't it? Like it just resonated with her on some deeper level.
She even had those childhood ideas about past lives.
Right. Being a French actress or a sailor, it shows how deep that early fascination went, how it got woven into her imagination and sense of self.
And art was there from really early on, too. That Easter drawing when she was 5.
Yeah, the super detailed cartoon chick. It shows an inclination right from the start.
And that interest clearly grew. She drew chickens, then horses.
You see that progression. And the fact that art class was a priority in junior high, that she even worked it into other homework like that map project.
It shows it wasn't just a hobby, it was becoming central. How important is that early encouragement, like her parents framing her work?
Oh, it's crucial. It validates the effort, tells the young artist what you're doing matters. It's valuable. That tangible recognition fuels the fire, you know, encourages them to keep going.
And then she got involved with actual working artists.
Yes, Roselle and Roderick Sykes, the African-American artists, and their place, St. Elmo Village.
That sounds like an amazing place, all colorful murals.
Yeah, a really vibrant artistic community. And she actually worked there, helped out, even taught some art.
Wow, as a teenager, that's incredible experience.
Invaluable. Being immersed in that, seeing art as part of a community, maybe even social commentary, it broadens your whole perspective beyond just making pictures yourself.
Gives you confidence, too, probably, belonging to that world.
For sure, which connects in an interesting way to her early activism, too.
Right. Even as a teen, she was involved in protests, Vietnam War, McGovern campaign, protesting a nuclear plant.
It shows she wasn't just wrapped up in her own artistic world. She was engaged with bigger issues, developing a social conscience, a sense of civic responsibility, wants to have a say in the world around her.
Okay, so moving into the trickier territory of adolescence and relationships, she sets the scene against that backdrop of Southern California drug culture.
Yeah, that context is important for understanding some choices later. She mentions, trying a bit of alcohol, marijuana. There's that one story at the Santa Monica Civic Center.
Sounds like maybe a bit of a scare, or at least memorable.
Definitely seems like a learning experience. But the key thing is, she consciously decided not to get into hard drugs.
And her reason was quite specific, wasn't it?
Yeah, wanting to have healthy kids someday, which is, well, pretty mature and forward-looking for a teenager in that environment.
That clarity, that sense of future self, it probably connects to deciding to go to Le Lycée Français.
I think so. It was partly an escape route from that drug scene, yes, but also very much about pursuing the Paris dream.
Right, combining practicality with aspiration.
Exactly. It wasn't just about academics for her. It was tied up with who she wanted to be, where she wanted to go.
And she still found a way to express her individuality even with the uniform.
Uh-huh. Yeah, tweaking the hemline. A little act of rebellion, very relatable teenage stuff.
So before Johnny, there were some earlier crushes and dates. Pretty standard teenage experiences.
Seems like it. The unrequited crush, the fascination with the older bad boy, that chaotic beach party date.
Oh, yeah, the one with Miles.
Yeah.
Sounds messy.
Yeah, escaping the chaos. It's all part of figuring out relationships, navigating those awkward feelings.
But that experience with Randy, the second base thing,
Hmm.
that had a bigger impact.
It sounds like it, yeah. Really hit her self-esteem, and she links it to the start of dieting.
And knowing she later became a model, that connection feels quite pointed.
It does. It shows how those seemingly small, maybe embarrassing early moments can plant seeds for much bigger issues later, like body image struggles.
Then there was Steve, the surfer. A slightly different vibe.
Yeah, described as a more sophisticated first date, a bit of a contrast to the earlier awkwardness.
Okay, so then comes Johnny. He sounds like he made quite an impression.
Definitely. The cool artist persona, the French car. He had an allure.
And his ex-girlfriend influenced her.
Indirectly, yeah. This ex was apparently a bohemian dresser, artsy, free-spirited style, and that got the author interested in sewing, a skill that pops up later.
Interesting how things connect. So the relationship developed, hiking, swimming.
Finding that cave with the ocean view sounds quite romantic.
And her parents were okay with it all.
Seems like they were pretty open-minded, trusted her judgment, which probably helped the relationship feel more natural, less pressured.
They got serious pretty quickly, didn't they? Road trips, dreaming about that White House.
Oh, yeah. Big Sur, Sequoia, singing Hey Jude. Really building shared memories, shared dreams. The depth of feeling comes across strongly.
She was writing him love poems.
Postponing Paris to stay with him, enrolling at Cal State Northridge instead.
And sewing that quilt for their future home together. That's a big symbol.
A huge symbol of commitment and their shared vision, which of course makes the betrayal hit even harder.
Yeah, that holiday party scene. Waiting for Johnny.
Agonizing. And then Brian dropping that bombshell. Johnny cheating with Mary Tyler Moore's stand-in.
Oof. The shock, the disbelief she describes. The room spinning.
It's palpable. And Brian just handing her the stand-in's phone number cold.
Then the phone call. Johnny just apologizes.
Immediately, no denial. And she just drops the phone, totally devastated.
But the real gut punch seems to be seeing the quilt.
Oh, absolutely. Going with Brian to the stand-in's place in Santa Monica and seeing that quilt, the symbol of their future, cut up and used as curtains.
Wow, that's brutal.
Incredibly symbolic, isn't it? Just disrespecting everything it represented. You completely understand her intense reaction, her withdrawal after that.
And that was it for Cal State Northridge? For L.A., really?
Pretty much. She decided not to go back. Felt like L.A. was just too small for both her and Johnny now. That betrayal was a major catalyst.
So Paris was back on the agenda with urgency.
Definitely. The dream reignited, but now fueled by the need to escape, to start fresh, so she starts saving money.
Right, the string of jobs.
Yeah, showing that resilience again. Baskin-Robbins.
The overscooping incident.
Yeah. Clothing store, waitressing day shift, night shift, apparently bad at both.
Relatable?
And then the plant store job.
Ah, that one didn't end well either.
No. That incident with the boss, the inappropriate behavior, that seems like it was the final straw.
So the heartbreak plus this harassment.
Yeah, it all just solidified the decision. Time to go. Get out of L.A., leave it all behind.
And so she did. February 1973, 19 years old, on a plane to Paris.
Leaving Johnny, leaving the creepy plant store boss, leaving that whole chapter behind. A clean break.
So when we look back at this whole period covered in the excerpts, what are the main takeaways?
Well, you really see the immense impact of those early years, don't you? The adventurous spirit from her dad, the art and language interests nurtured by her family, the lessons from relationships, both the good and the really painful ones.
All builds a foundation.
Exactly. It lays the groundwork for who she became. And you constantly see that theme her father instilled.
Write your own script.
Yeah. Even when things fall apart, like with Johnny, she doesn't just crumble. She picks up the pen, figuratively speaking, and starts writing the next chapter, Paris, taking control again.
It's a really strong through line.
It is. And what's really fascinating, thinking ahead, is that as she sat on that plane heading to Paris to pursue, maybe language or art, she had absolutely no idea that a completely different path was waiting. Modeling, a career she probably couldn't have even conceived of back then.
Wow. So all these formative experiences we've talked about.
They laid the groundwork, shaped her resilience, her curiosity, her drive, but for a future that was totally unexpected. It makes you think, doesn't it? About the threads in our own lives, how things connect in ways we just can't predict.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us today.